crazy, Rod. I just learned a new concept from you. Vibe coding. I've never heard of it.
It's a new term, so the cookies are using it. We are cookies here, also we're vibe coders.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Chris Rod Night Show. Today we have Chris and Rod with us, where every week we discuss the latest AI news and provide some sort of insights to what is going on in the market. And this week, we have a few things that we'd like to cover. Everything from Mistral to how web text to app applications are developing, down to Elon Musk is trying to buy OpenAI, and the snarky response from Sam Altman, as well as what is going on in the world of deepfakes, as well as chatbots distorting some news. And without further ado, let's jump straight in. So, Chris, Rod, how are you guys doing today?
I would say apparently not as good as you, so here, Mr. James Bond.
Yeah, well, I don't think I can call myself James Bond, but definitely more on business. Given the first topic, Mistral gets down to business. I thought I'll dress for the occasion. So,
Not Max.
Choice.
so on this end, so what we have here in the article, TechCrunch recently published an article around how Mistral's focus is really driving towards business users. And I have heard about this for a couple of months now, having been in this industry, in the sense that they're going down and speak to, I would say, banks, larger organizations to hold Mistral's models internally so that people could build on it, but not quite sure how I would say, business would work out, as in the pricing, etc. So from that focus as well, love to also get both your takes. Number one, on the potential business model here with Mistral, given that Llama is trying to, it's entirely open source. Number two is also on the divergent approach that Mistral is taking versus what ChatGPT and Anthropic is trying to do. So, maybe I'll start off with you, Rod. Given that you have been playing with some of these applications, love to get a little bit of your thought. As a user, how are you thinking about working with ChatGPT, Anthropic, and Mistral? And also as a builder, how are you thinking about this?
Yes, Max. So we have here a few things that come together. On one side, so this week there were big announcements from Mistral, of course, models and so on, but also they released their own mobile application called the Chat. All of a sudden, you will see on social media everyone saying, "No, Mistral is amazing, #1 app," and so on. And I imagine that most of them were based in France because, for example, here in the UK, when I looked into where is Mistral ranked, it will not be even in the top 200 of most downloaded apps on the App Store. It was maybe like in the top 22 or so of a category productivity. On one side, yeah, the app now can compete with, for example, ChatGPT, iOS app, DeepSeek app, and so on and so forth. But on the other side, still, it's also like a regional effort. And you can even see that with how much money they have raised. Meaning, Mistral has raised 1 billion, and you say, yeah, it's a lot. But then if you compare that with, for example, how much OpenAI has raised, which is like really at least one zero extra, right? So it's, if I'm not mistaken, they have raised not even one zero extra, it's like 200 times more. It must be, because if I remember correctly, have raised like 300 billion or something like this. And something like, for example, like Anthropic. So Anthropic has raised, if I'm not mistaken, also like 18 billion. So yes, they are making the best effort, but at the same time, they're behind in terms of how much money it has raised. And this is also seen in the performance of the models, where their models, yes, are good, and they were quite okay for most of the year. But now with DeepSeek, they are so far behind comparatively. This is the first thing. And the second thing is also the whole narrative. So now, not that many people are talking about Mistral anymore. So they're talking about DeepSeek. And in addition to that, it's also the question of why now use, let's say, this specific app, the Chat app, or any app from Mistral for that matter. So to the point of focusing on business, what I suspect is maybe it might happen very similar to, for example, Aleph Alpha in Germany. They started doing models and trying to be a direct competitor with OpenAI. At some point, they realized we cannot compete at all. And then they have just focused in saying, hey, let us help companies who are implemented SAP just to do AI.
I think that's relatively interesting. So I just checked out in terms of OpenAI's funding, I think they have raised about what 17 or 20, 17.9 billion, something along the line, but they are in talks with what you call it, SoftBank to try to raise 40 billion at a 300 billion valuation. So when it comes to funding, yes, it is by a magnitude away from what Mistral is trying to do. I think to your point around the constraint in funding, I I think we're definitely seeing that, but I also felt that, given what is going on with DeepSeek, for example, utilizing less funding to try to come up with better models, they obviously had better, I will call it, traction or for the past 2 weeks or so because they released some sort of chat app as well as open sourcing their models. I think Chris wanted to get your thoughts a little bit on this, right? So, as we're thinking about, adopting some of these different models, like based on your conversations with, whomever is trying to build something here, how are people thinking about this, right? Comparing Mistral with open source models like DeepSeek as well as Llama and obviously in the token-based ChatGPT. And are we looking at more adoption because Mistral has been focusing more on this, or are people just, generally like whichever is the cheapest and the fastest, we'll go with that?
I don't think anyone, at least here in this region in Asia, knows about Mistral. I think it's never like a conversation point, to be honest. I think now the question is really about, is it DeepSeek? Are you going with OpenAI or actually Microsoft Copilot? I think is a big one. But also, I think if you look at the article, I mean, it talks about this enterprise approach that Mistral wants to take now and really being the AI for enterprise. But looking at the list of businesses so far, and also to Rod's earlier comment on who actually downloaded the app, Le Chat, probably. I mean, that's the whole. I guess the word game in French, the chat being the cat. But anyways, if you look at that, I think it's only at this point in time French companies. So also, I thought it was very curious to hear that there was this event, and then there was Macron, the president of France, like supporting Mistral. To me, it really sounds like almost like a nationalistic push, given that AI has been such a politicized and also geopolitical topic between the US and China. And I think at least my LinkedIn X has been flooded with, commentary on like Europe having another chance, right? Like things are getting cheaper. And also to your point, Rod, around, yes, OpenAI has actually gotten so much more money than Mistral, but I wonder if this is really the right way to like measure success coming out of a model, whether or not you get a lot of money or not, because I think DeepSeek has been really like the oddball in the game that actually shows, okay, you can also do a lot with less. And I think this is what I think Macron, France are really hoping for, that now Mistral has another chance, can really develop much faster, being open source and getting the support of at least on a national level from like companies to get adopted and be almost like a European version. Because apart from Mistral, I don't really see any other competitor that like a serious contender to any of the LLMs coming out of Europe.
However, I keep thinking, so if that's even, it's like a problem or a need and so on, I suspect that something in European companies such as Mistral, long term will only be able to be on the same level as the other players if we have regulations stating European governmental agencies or companies larger than X employees and so on, they have to use European models, otherwise they're not allowed in the market, or some restriction like that. They'll say like a GDPR of sorts, where data must be stored in the European Union. That happens also for AI, where models must be European in order to be used by Europeans.
I think that's an interesting thought because you could see that being applied in different regions, right? For example, there are two ways to do this, right? Obviously, you think about it from China's perspective. Like China was basically, there are a few things that is so critical to the ecosystem that they believe that they have to build it themselves, right? So the example that I have in my mind is like the payment network. They didn't let Visa to get in until they allow Union Pay to come up, which I agree, right? Because if you don't control your own payments, you kind of just kind of kill off you starve the rails to get money to your people. So that's one. I could think of it as another way, which is what India did, which is to build a more performant level of payment system, which is the UPI Aadhaar. So you think of it as a infrastructure in which you could potentially propagate across the region. But the thing about Europe is we're 27 countries. I do not know how that will work. Given that Mistral started in France, I suspect they're pretty good at French. I do not know how that will work with other languages across Europe, but I don't know if that would be a better approach. But that's an interesting thought. And also to your point, Chris, around the AI summit, I take a quick pass. I think there was an article coming out like today or yesterday, something along that line, where a lot of the EU representative, I would say, political representative, were talking about how they need to push more of European innovation, but when it comes to the innovators, what they're really asking for is actually lack of, well, should I say, deregulate, right? Almost someone actually said on quoted on the fact that they have to almost remove the EU AI Act so that to let other people to run and build. And there was a comment that I saw that people made, by deploying 109 million, which is in France. So basically, Macron announced that they are going to deploy about $109 billion in France, building data centers similar to a Stargate of France. And I saw quite an interesting comment. Basically, people dissing it, right? They felt that it's a waste of money to give 109 billion because it's actually smarter to just deregulate and let people build. Maybe deploy that into private sector. I think both views have its merits, but yeah, I think at this point, because AI is just so early, I don't know, regulating it is actually a good idea. At least that's my current take. I don't know if both of you have any take on that, but yeah.
The only thing that comes to mind with all this announcement is we'll see how much of that is reality, right? So we see also in other areas of politics and so on that it also feels that the European Union always sort of like try to follow any US announcement. Back in the Biden years, there was this Build Back Better and all these other government state-funded investment initiatives, and immediately the European Union needs to launch a counterpart program and so on. So I do not know from these announcements how much of that in the end was materialized, how much was just pure positioning. And here I also wonder how much of that we'll see and that it happens, and also this new investment versus something that was likely committed, and maybe they're calculating, okay, so much external capital fund here and so on. We sort of like ballpark figure and so, and then we make this announcement. So here we have to always be careful with like politics, where they make these bombastic releases and so on. But then, let's say 5 years from now, will that happen? I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's hope.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to be fair and also to be positive here for a second, I think it is good that Europe is now waking up, perhaps, and try and actually finding the type of sums that are required to build out their infrastructure around AI. And I do believe that also Europe trying to really play along is a good thing. I think, and I had a debate and a conversation with a friend around this whole topic. I think in general, what I would wish for Europe would be some own stance and position on some of these topics rather than to follow, and it's almost like a copy paste from the US, but on a smaller scale. I do believe also that you could argue that the EU Act is one of its kind, right? It is born out of the EU, and it is trying to regulate and make the use of AI safer for people. And I think we had a debate around whether or not this is a good thing or it's not a good thing, because obviously it helps to protect, but at the same time, it might also stall innovation around AI and also actually make European companies much slower to adopt and everything. And I think the gist of the conversation was that it really depends on what your purpose and your objective is at the end of the day, right? Is it about somehow winning this race, although it really does feel like an ego race here at this point in time? Is it about the adoption, the proliferation of new technologies from a particular country? Or is it about sort of like adhering to your values as a nation, as a union, or whatever, and really play by that? And I think that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Something that I wonder is, on one side we have investors coming on and saying, "Hey, the value, the growth, everything will be accrued on application layer. This is where people should follow. They should not think about building new models. They should not think about here the basic infrastructure and so on." But at the same time, we have this narrative of saying we need European models. We need to have our own OpenAI and so on. So, do you feel there is some dissonance here on one side where the smart money is on their thoughts, and on the other side what we're getting from politicians and so on?
I think on this point, I think that's exactly what I was trying to get to initially, which is, you mentioned that Mistral is building out all this application layer, trying to come up with their own chat. And because of, the narrative around commoditization of all the different LLMs, the value almost comes down to, if you're closer to the application layer, you're closer to the end user, eventually will get you there. And I guess then the question becomes, is that actually true? And if someone else is powering all the underlying infrastructure, will then the value accrue to those other models? I think in a way, you're almost providing yourself a alternative to what could be an entire vendor lock-in, right? If the whole world only built on ChatGPT, I will be quite scared. Simply because it's like every one of us use Microsoft, and then Microsoft decided to go down. It's a bit like the CrowdStrike incident, right? The whole world just go red. So I don't know, just from a disaster recovery perspective, it might be better. I think, speaking of a application layer, A16Z recently came out with a new article, which is new. People are using prompts to build products. The rise of like AI powered web app builders, as you can see here, I thought was quite interesting. For a person who coded but not very good at it, haven't deployed anything. I thought this was quite a cool build up for people who wants to build solutions. I think in this article they go into what are all the different applications that you can use, number one. Number two, also it highlighted some of the challenges. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time to get both your thoughts around this, right? So both of you have been in the building space for some time now as an entrepreneur, either you coded or not coded. Love to get your take around this, around how text to web app are building as we go, or should I say are evolving as we go. And also, what do you think about some of the problems and challenges that we're seeing at the moment with with this type of application, right? So it comes down to three things really. In the article, it summarizes into integration problems. There are still a lot of bugs that come around it, and then the code kind of get too big for the product. At one point, we just stop thinking about this. So maybe I'll start with you, Rod. Given that you've built stuff, so let's get your thoughts.
If we think about which type of app categories are the most popular on the internet, or what is always coming, so what do companies, individuals, and so on always need? It's pretty much like blogs, shops. So what's there? Some CRM, some ERP, etc. So and though we see so many applications that are around, so many websites, if you boil it down on what is it exactly that they are doing, it's really very simple for the most part. There's some way to present content, some way to sell products, some way to structure data and visualize it. But that's it. And yet we have these different vendors, so from SAP, Salesforce, and so on. And part of that is because software is always expensive and complicated to build. Not everyone knows how to do it, and so on. So you have sort of like shoehorn whatever it is that someone is offering to your business processes, to your own needs. However, what happens when the cost of building software goes close to zero and pretty much anyone can build? Then maybe something that Steve Jobs used to have. So he used to have this thought that computers should be bicycles for the mind, meaning it should be very lean, malleable, easy to use. Maybe you use it for some occasions very quickly. Whereas now we have all these clunky, not bicycles, but almost like tanks. So although the type of categories that we have for websites and for applications is, let's say, like quite limited, thanks to this type of app builder that are building upon app builders that already existed for decades, like Squarespace and Wix and so on, they have been around for quite some time. It allows that companies can have really tailored experience bespoke to their processes and their needs without needing to invest relevant amount of money. So that's really positive.
Yeah, I think as a person who don't build as much, right? So if I were to prompt and create stuff that is super interesting, number one, they also mentioned that a lot because of some of the challenges that you have today, you can't really deploy it immediately, but it is very good from a prototyping perspective. You could almost tell it to build something really quickly, and then you get to see how that goes. Some of those applications that are being built can be transported into code, but a lot of it will have its own challenges as you go about it. I think one thing that I've been thinking about is, around, it really depends who the user. I think in the article, it also talks about this, right? If you're only building a simple application, like you mentioned, Rod, which is just create web pages, etc., then tools like this will be really helpful, right? Something simple. But when you get down to a little bit more complicated, a little bit more tailored application, you probably still need a lot of engineers to get in there, to get their hands dirty and really understand the entire flow of it. I think, whereas as we talked about earlier with the commoditization of like LLMs, like even tools like this will probably, at one point will probably prompt to build agents down the line. It's almost like you're teaching someone to, in a way.
Yeah, I think so as well. And to be honest, we are not at a stage where it's just a one-click button type of thing where you click the button and then miraculously whatever you dreamed about will just be on screen. I've actually tested some of these website builders, some of the Wix.com or Squarespace that were mentioned in the article. And I mean, it helps as a fundamental step, but at the same time, to me, it just feels almost like an upgrade of a what you see is what you get type of model, which is essentially one of those web builders where you just move around your button or your shape, and then it will actually be decoded or encoded into HTML and JavaScript. So it just feels like almost like an upgrade of that. But I think there's still a lot of questions and a lot of thinking you need to do as a human being. And I think the fallacy is obviously a lot of people go there and they want like this one click button and they feel maybe a bit disappointed that that's not happening just yet. But, I think there are a lot of questions around, for example, like what's your ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve? And I think that's one question I don't think AI can really answer for us because really it comes down to what we want and what we think. And if that's unclear, it gets hard to as an AI to really execute on it. But then again, I think it really comes down to the nitty gritty details, right? So it's almost like this 80-20 model we see here where 80% of a website, the structure of a website, the layout can be done by AI, but then it really anyways comes down to the 20%. And so that's also the reason why the article says it's kind of like you have an army of developer interns and web design interns, but still you need like this head. You need to be the head of them to really drive them into a direction you actually want.
The cool kids even have already developed a term for this. They're calling it vibe coding. This is the idea that you can program just by writing some prompts using these builders and so on. And yes, indeed, Chris. So it is something where you can very quickly develop good results. But people already know two things. One is what you get as an output, you don't really understand all the time what's happening. And two, people are reporting that they're getting a little bit more, maybe atrophied, maybe they are like losing skills, even developers, where they say we're now relying more and more on these tools, and now when I want to do something without these tools, without this help, I feel stiff. I can't really do it efficiently. And I hear and read more and more also developers saying, I will start having no AI days where I will just program on my own, because otherwise later I just don't have this skill anymore. It's like any muscle, so it becomes atrophied and it gets very, very hard. In my case, I really write by hand. So when I have to write something by hand, it feels so difficult to do it. So similar is with programming.
Crazy, Rod. I just learned a new concept from you. Vibe coding. I've never heard of it.
It's a new term. So the cookies are using it. We are cookies here. Also, we're vibe coders.
And look at the video up there. It's like 3 days ago. That's how new it is.
Maybe we should talk about it in our next episode a little bit deeper, what that is. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Internet meme.
This is so cool. Vibe coding. I think, Rod, to your point around using technology and eventually losing, some of the more fundamental skills, I think that's an interesting point. If you think about, let's say, reading, thinking, like even searching for information, let's say, traditionally I think, let's say Edwin Len, right, which is Steve Jobs' idol. And when he wanted to learn everything about light, because he was the guy who created Polaroid, and when he wanted to learn about light, he would go to a library and read everything about light, right? Everything from the books till the end. But nowadays, because we have information at the tip of our fingertips, we can almost just Google it. It kind of just tells you everything in one place. The question then becomes, we gain speed, but we lose some of those, I guess, hard work or serotonin type task to get to that answer. Like how will that change the way we think? It's an interesting question. It's more philosophical, and we will probably only know 100 years later by watching people's brain, what is it that we lost from that perspective. But yeah, I think vibe coding sounds like a very interesting term. It's like people are losing vibe by vibe coding. That's why they need no AI days. But cool. I think on that as well, I think one thing that I've been thinking from a prompt to app perspective, which is around the user not being consumer, but more of businesses. So within businesses, more often than not, there are a lot of smaller applications internally, especially large enterprises. They tend to build in-house. They are normally not very well built either. But I felt that, with tools like this, it can speed up a lot of all those buildings just from a testing perspective to either figure out this is a good idea or not. And then that's why, if you look at here, there's a diverging of user persona on the article. I thought that was interesting because internally, even, if I were to think about all the different enterprises that they are trying to use tools, they're not just doing it for autocomplete on the building site as a code base, kind of autocomplete code, but they're also thinking about it from a whether or not business users can go in and try to build a quick application that is integrated across the enterprise. I don't know when that day will come, but I think that will be pretty cool, and it will save a lot of time and money for large enterprises. Number one. Number two, and consultants will probably get hit, especially the larger consultants that build applications like this for large enterprises. So I think that's just something that I thought will be interesting to mention, because we are seeing that in different enterprises actually. And I guess now we're almost halfway through, and the next news that I thought would be interesting, it's around Elon Musk, trying to buy OpenAI. So for context, for those, well, probably everyone knows this, Elon Musk is one of the co-founder of OpenAI. He has always been a very big advocate of OpenAI being open. And obviously, Sam Altman is currently trying to turn OpenAI, a non-profit, into a for-profit. And there's some, I guess, structuring problem around that, but that's for a different day. And Elon Musk is basically trying to lead a group of consortia trying to buy it for 97 billion. And at the same time, as we mentioned earlier, OpenAI is trying to raise 40 billion at 300 billion valuation. And to counter that, basically Sam Altman, I think on X responded, "No thanks." I think this is literally what I say. No thanks. But we're happy to buy X for 9.7 billion or something like that. I find the few quite entertaining at one part, but at the same time, if I were to look deeper, I just wanted to understand, what's Elon Musk's intention around this. He said quite openly he wants OpenAI to continue to be a non-profit. But I thought it would be good to get both your takes around this, right? So if Elon Musk is trying to, because I would say, advocate for an open source or non-profit OpenAI, where do you think things are going wrong with OpenAI? How do you guys think about where things are going from here onwards, right? Because obviously Elon Musk has XAI as well. So maybe the Chris, Rod, whomever wants to take this, it's a little bit more of a political situation between the both of them as well.
Well, we can see from multiple perspectives. On one side, why is he doing that? You never know, right? So if we reflect about when he bought Twitter, now X, back then it felt like it was impulsively, to the point that at some point he tried to roll it back and he lost legally. He was forced to buy it because he made a buy offer that was seemingly higher than the market value. And once he realized the actual market value, he tried to negotiate it and he couldn't because he already committed to that. So here, we don't know if this is some sort of like impulse buyer, just like everyone else. When you go to the supermarket and you see this cool new product on the shelves and say, hey, I gotta have it, even though you don't need it, or if there is something more behind. And to your point, Max, so a non-profit and how should this be done? Do we need it? We already have non-profit research, and it's called universities, in research labs and so on. However, what happens is that at some point, always with research, it gets so expensive. This cannot be funded by public sources. This has to be commercialized somehow, and it has to become a viable business. And here we're also seeing the same thing, where OpenAI indeed started as this idea of being open. In some show, we're saying that this is rather now closed now. But this also is true the reality that in order to be able to fund all the resources required for this, let's just think about overhead. If you go to a salary website, yeah, so like something like levels, so there is one levels FYI, right? So then you say here, so OpenAI. So how much are people at OpenAI earning? And so here the salary is here. And if you see here, so a software engineer, we're not talking about like the AI expert or something, like a very senior person, the total compensation is 1.2 million per year, right? So sure, this includes all type of like stock grants and so on. So here on one side, we see that they need to have a lot of cash in the bank account to make payroll. But second, also the valuation needs to keep increasing, right? In order to keep granting these stock grants and so on. So how is it supposed to be happening if it is not on a very commercial, very like ambitious, venture-backed setting?
That's an interesting point, especially around trying to get the most, I guess, talent or most dense talent. You almost need to pay the high amount of money. And even looking at this, compensation, like stock is a huge amount of the 1.26 million from a component of that. I think you kind of just have to keep pushing the valuation up and then almost finding someone to fund it. I think my general sense is, OpenAI has been, obviously they kind of created the category per se, in this market. So there is a huge value in owning that, number one. Number two, by making it non-profit, making it open, I don't know how advanced that will be, simply because where we are today in this cycle, where in around the world, like capitalism is well and alive, and everyone is trying to make a buck on what's going on with the latest trends, and I guess the overall goal here to acquire it may also to serve all his own enterprises as well, because Elon Musk does have a lot of things that's really under his belt. I really don't know how he spends his day. And I guess, from a developer and builder perspective, I don't really know if that will change as much whoever own this. That's just, something that I've been thinking about. It doesn't really matter who bought it as long as you continue developing the underlying models. I think this is the mantra of YC, right? Build something people want. I don't know if people want profit or non-profit. It really doesn't matter. That's just how I think about it.
Honestly, guys, I think it's just a personal fight here. I haven't really like dug into this news. I'm like, okay, one of those again, right? Like a failed court and legal case. Okay, now they're trying to like take on each other, and I don't know. I mean, I would be super curious to hear from employees inside of OpenAI, like how they actually perceive it. Does it feel like a nonprofit? Does it feel like a for profit? Is Sam Altman sort of like worship as an like a Steve Jobs? Is it how is it to be really working for them? And given that there were so many high profile leavers of the company, I guess my sense is like it's gotten probably very political or very ego driven. And some of these folks that are definitely and obviously super talented, like the CTO and also the co founder leaving the company, I think is a very strong signal, at least showing a little bit like the type of culture you have there. And perhaps they didn't feel like they were able to really focus on the product because there was so much politics. And to me, this Elon Musk thing now trying to bid for it, Sam saying no, to me, it's just very a lot of distraction. It may or may not entertain the media, but I think overall it might, yeah, it doesn't add to the greater good, to be honest.
So to your point, Chris, of being now very politicized and like a organization, I mean, on LinkedIn, there are almost 6,000 employees or 6,000 profiles that report being affiliated to OpenAI. So of course, if you have like 6,000, then this cannot be anymore a scrappy startup. So this has to be really like enterprise corporate structures.
Yeah, I think there's also the point around organizing people to do those work, right? I think traditionally, people tend to come together and band together, but with the advent of companies, that probably is one of the reason why they want to go for profit as well, just for I guess incentive alignment. Cool. I think looking at OpenAI saying that creating safe AGI that benefits all of humanity. We have another news around safe AGI. So I think recently, I think Scarlett Johansson, if people who do not know her, she's Black Widow on Marvel, probably, probably that will help. So she's, I guess, calling on government to pass a law on the use of AI for deepfakes. And I thought this kind of ties into the earlier conversation that we have around whether or not regulating AI is actually a good idea. I thought, in this news, we're actually seeing a lot of deepfakes that's going on. Obviously, one is Scarlett Johansson, and also a lot of others I would call uh, more famous people. But at the same time, especially sitting on an enterprise and business level as well, we're also seeing deepfakes, phishing emails being pushed out a lot more. And there was statistics around this, right? So I was looking at, like, let's say Gartner was predicting that, 30% of enterprises will consider identity verification and authentication to be unreliable due to deepfakes down the line. So if you think about how we're using identification today, let's say if I want to sign up for a banking app, you have to eventually kind of just scan your face. But because with deepfake, I felt like that will become obsoleted in the future. And how will that then evolve? I do not know. I don't even know how will I be able to tell a true person's voice if they were to call me, or if it's an AI generated voice, for example. That's not even going down to deepfakes yet, right? Which is the video and the voice. So I wanted to get, Rod, Chris, both your views around the whole deepfake phenomenon here. Are you folks hearing anything from your networks, what is going on? Are people taking the right precaution? And how are they thinking about how do they battle this sort of fraud, for example?
Well, I think this has been around since the beginning of the internet, right? So back then, or even until recently, you'll just copy paste the photo of someone, the face of someone on Photoshop. Maybe you will blur things a bit around, and then there you have the face of Scarlett Johansson in someone else's body, and Sometimes people will believe it, sometimes not, and so on. So this has been with us since this has always been the case. That has not changed. Maybe what's now more nefarious and dangerous, it was what you were describing, Max, that indeed now we can bypass all type of security checks, identification, and so on. And likely this might mean that we might have to go back to maybe like offline processes where there was, of course, a time where it was not possible to open a bank account online completely, even on the age of the internet. But for example, you could start a process online and then you have to go to, let's like a post office or some physical place where someone will match your ID with your face. Maybe we'll go back to these type of situations where if you really want to trust something, it has to happen in the physical world. However, I do not see how making this illegal, passing laws and so on will change that. I mean, there is of course laws against piracy, and this has not deterred piracy. I think piracy is now as large as it has ever been, even though we have now so many mechanisms that deter it, both legal and technological. So here, I don't think that any type of legislation might be the solution for that, or they can have any impact.
I think this is a serious problem. And I would expect that we will be doing many, many more two-factor authentications. And I think the whole space around cybersecurity is also one that we probably should take focus on, given that AI is on the rise. I think there will be more and more mechanisms also defined and also deployed that we will have to like stick to. I don't know. I feel like 10 years ago doing business was so much easier. I didn't have to like sign into Microsoft like every 5 days or so. So I think that is probably on the more cumbersome side that will increase. And at the same time, I think we also spoke about this whole idea around generated by AI tag or pixel. That definitely will also, I'm sure, going to be some PhD topics at universities in computer science to figure out what is the best way on securing that. At the same time, I do think some of these videos that are clearly fake were pretty funny. I think the latest I saw was a video about Squid Game. I think one of the trailers, and then they replaced the heads with some prominent people such as Biden and Trump and so forth. So that was actually a funny video. But yeah, I know. I mean, jokes aside, I think this is definitely a big problem, not necessarily just for the Hollywood stars and sort of the credits that they would earn or the things that will get posted on them, but I think in general that will be a big problem and needs to have quite a bit of attention. So I would agree with it.
I was thinking something that has been already happening for many years and likely will get even worse are all these phone scams where, especially with elderly, so they get some phone call, someone claiming it's maybe some relative, grandchildren, and so on. They're in trouble. Please send now money to this address, etc., to these bank details. And many people every year they transfer significant amounts, believing that this is real, and turning out that it's a complete scam. And this already now with just someone grabbing the phone and calling the number, with a voice not resembling at all the actual voice of the relative. So imagine a situation where it's very easy to replicate our voices, and it's possible to extract the details of our relatives and then call them and say, hey, dad, mom, whoever, I need some help now. It's very urgent. That's something that indeed I see difficult, but more so for those who are maybe not necessarily very attuned with technology, that might very easily fall prey to all these scams.
I think it doesn't just affect the vulnerable folks as well, right? Because it's becoming so real. Sometimes I even find it hard to differentiate myself, right? Just case in point. So I think in 2024, there is a deepfake of British engineering firm, Arab CFO led to a transfer of 25 million to bank accounts in Hong Kong. And then a staff member basically had a video conference with a former CFO and other deepfake employees. And I think things like this are probably going to come up even more down the line. And I suspect with more people coming online, especially in like emerging markets, people are just slowly getting to it. I think it will change how we trust or not trust certain information. And I think the other thing that that worries me is, technology is inherently no good or bad. It's just really the actors. And if you were to use this technology, I could potentially set up, I don't know, like a little village and show them cult videos of, you shaking hand, me shaking hand with Biden. I can set up a cult, and people just believe in it. And I find that quite dangerous. And I also felt that because of that, people need to be even more um, critical about the information they are receiving online. And therefore, it comes down to like education. Are people thinking critically for everything that are coming in that they are receiving? Which I don't think people are doing a lot today. I think, yeah, so here you go. So this is the article, which is quite dangerous, I must say. Um, I think on critical thinking as well, the other article that caught my eye recently is, around, I would say, almost, I won't say call it fake news, but almost like getting some of the facts wrong. We as human tend to be a little bit loose with facts. Occasionally, I know I am, right? So sometimes they're not all 100% accurate with all the things that you say. But now that people are using way more AI chatbots to search for information, I feel like this could also become a little bit of a problem. I think it also ties back to, the EU AI regulation, understanding where the liability falls, right? Because you'll never be able to control how information flow, but maybe some sort of guardrails around the actions that come out of it would be super helpful. But I think it's just something that I've been thinking about, especially if you think about how large corporates tend to make decisions. If information comes in slightly wrongly, you could directly affect how decisions are being made, which then have implications down the line. Hence why, like deepfakes with fake news, you can almost create an alternate universe in a different world if you control how information flow entirely, which I thought was quite dangerous. And I think, Rod, Chris, I don't know how much you guys use ChatGPT to get information all the time, but I do that occasionally. But having seen this, is like, okay, maybe I always need to, double check on every single thing, at least for now. But Rod,
I use it for some time. Sometimes I use it. However, I noticed that it is significantly slower. So there are many who claim, yeah, so like Google is dead because who will use Google anyway? So now there's no need because we have Perplexity, ChatGPT, and others. However, I notice how it takes much longer to get an answer from like Perplexity or ChatGPT because first it has to crawl the internet as Google will do it, then extract the information and summarize it. Whereas with Google, you get the results immediately. So if I know what I'm looking for, I always resort to Google. However, there are many times where I don't know how to formulate that thought, or I'm thinking, how is it described, or what was the word for this, or something. And then I can make a very vague description of something that I'm looking for, put it on something like Perplexity or ChatGPT, and get the answer. That's where I find like a lot of value. But to your point here of this story of stories being misrepresented and facts being left aside and so on, well, that's just, let's say, the nature of this type of models, how they work. So you do not have any guarantee that they will reproduce all relevant facts, that they will not drop anything, or they will change information. That can happen. And I'm not sure that there is any way how this can really be counter and completely mitigated 100%. What these vendors that try to do is they provide a source. They say, here there was original source. But even sometimes that can be wrong. They can be referencing something different or might be relevant and so on. Here is a little bit of buyer beware and always verify. So trust but verify.
yeah, I think as the crypto bros will say, do your own research, right? Yeah. These are just tools to help you get quicker. Doesn't mean it's the tools to help you finish. Um, cool. I think Chris, unless you have anything to add on this.
No, I think the takeaway for me is really at the end of the day, it's 80-20, guys, right? It's 80% can be done with the help of the tools. But again, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what your goals are, that's really hard for AI to correct, to be honest. So figure that out and do the last 20%, I think is really what I'm taking away from this session today.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. I think with that, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And as you heard, 80-20 rule. So if you want to hear all about the 80% of where AI is going, come to us. And if you have 20% of knowing what you want to do, give us a shout as well. Maybe we could do something cool together. So today's episode, we cover 5 different things, everything from Mistral's focus on consumer down to, prompt to production or to app with A16Z's latest article. We also cover Musk bid to buy OpenAI and deepfakes, as well as, I would say, distorted news. And thank you so much again for tuning in. We enjoy doing this as much as you like to listen to this. If you like this, give us a like, subscribe. And we also have a Substack now, which, please subscribe. Thank you so much.
On chrisrodmax.com. That's where you can find me.
That's it.